Hey there, idiots. Welcome back to Observe. In today's video, we're going to be talking about and analyzing the nonverbal communication of Rodney Alcala, a serial killer known as the dating game killer, murdered at least 8 women and assaulted at least 2 girls across the United States in the 1970s. However, his true death toll could be in fact much higher than that. Some estimates suggest that he may have killed as many as 130 victims. Alcala had a criminal history dating back to the early 1970s when he was convicted of child molestation and served nearly 3 years in prison. After his release, he continued to rape and kill. In 1978, Alcala appeared as a contestant on The Dating Game, winning a date with a woman who later backed out after meeting him. This earned him the nickname the Dating Game Killer. Alcala was arrested in 1979 and sentenced to death in California and died of natural causes in 2021 at the age of 77. More on that in just a second. Let's go ahead and roll the intro first. Alright, for those of you who do not know, Rodney James Alcala was born as Rodrigo Jacques Alcala Bacour in San Antonio, Texas on August 23rd of 1943. He moved to Mexico with his family at around the age of 8, but his father abandoned all of them while they were still living there. Alcala and his siblings and mother eventually moved back to Los Angeles. At age 17, Alcala joined the army but was discharged in 1964 after suffering a breakdown, being diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. He then attended California State University before transferring to the University of California, Los Angeles, where he graduated with a fine arts degree in 1968. Later that year, in 1968, a witness saw Alcala drive off with a young girl. Concerned, the witness followed them and called the police. When the police arrived, they found an incoherent 8-year-old girl who had been raped and beaten with a steel bar. Alcala fled the scene, and although the officer tried to catch him, he ended up getting away. Afterward, Alcala fled to the East Coast. In 1971, Alcala was placed on the FBI's most wanted list. He was eventually recognized by some girls in a camp in New Hampshire where he was working as a counselor under the name of John Berger in an attempt to hide from authorities. The girls alerted the camp's dean, and Alcala was arrested in August of 1971. He did plead guilty to the lesser charge of child molestation and served only 34 months in prison before being paroled out in August of 1974. Within weeks of his release, he was arrested again, this time for possession of marijuana, while with a 13-year-old girl that he did end up inappropriately kissing. He then returned to prison until 1977. Though he was already a registered sex offender, Alcala was able to land a job as a typesetter at the Los Angeles Times in 1977. In March of 1978, California police interviewed him as a potential suspect in the Hillside Strangler murders, another series of killings in California at the time. He was cleared of those crimes, though unknowingly they had actually spoken to just a different serial killer of the time. That same year, in September of 1978, Alcala appeared as Bachelor #1 on the popular TV show The Dating Game. At the time, he was a convicted child molester, but the show did not run background checks to the extent that we have now. When introduced, Alcala was described merely as a successful photographer, and in the show, when asked by contestant Cheryl Bradshaw what kind of meal he would be, Alcala responded interestingly that he was a banana and that he looks really good and to peel him. Alcala's charm and innuendo earned him a date with Bradshaw, but when they met face to face after the show, she found him to be creepy and refused to go out with him. This incident inspired the film Woman of the Hour, which dramatizes that very event. Alcala, a tall, handsome man with long, flowing hair, often told women he was a fashion photographer looking for models for some contest. His intelligence and charm helped him manipulate and lure many of his victims. One woman who missed a date with him in 1979 after he was arrested later said he was so easy to trust. He had a way of talking to people that really put them at ease. Once he had lured his victims, Alcala's true nature would emerge. He sexually assaulted and killed many of the women and girls that he ended up attacking. Autopsies of some of these victims showed that Alcala would strangle the women, then wait for them to regain consciousness before delivering the final blow and inevitably killing them. Sometimes he even posed their bodies after death. Between 1971 and 1979, Alcala killed 8 women in New York, California, and Wyoming. He also sexually assaulted 2 girls, one in 1968 and another in 1979. Alcala is also believed to be responsible for the murder of a California woman in 1977, though he was never charged with that specific crime. His true body count at this point remains uncertain, but some authorities believe that he may have murdered up to 50 or even 130 victims. Alcala was finally caught in 1979 after a 12-year-old girl disappeared while biking to a ballet class in Huntington Beach, California. Her remains were found soon after in the Angeles National Forest. A sketch of the suspect was issued and Alcala's parole officer immediately recognized him. Alcala was arrested on July 24th of 1979 and charged with the girl's abduction and murder. In a Seattle storage locker, police discovered hundreds of photographs and other trophies that Alcala had kept. Some of the people in the photos were later identified as his victims. Alcala was convicted of the 12-year-old girl's murder in 1980, but this conviction was unfortunately overturned in 1984 due to jury misconduct. In 1986, he was retried and convicted again, but that conviction was also overturned in 2001, again on another technicality. While in custody, Alcala wrote a book called You the Jury in 1994, in which he argued that he was, in fact, innocent. By 2010, DNA analysis had linked Alcala to more crimes. At this retrial that year, he was found not only guilty of the girl's murder, but also charged with the murders of 4 other women in California during the late 1970s. During the trial, Alcala chose to represent himself in a rather Ted Bundy twist. Part of the case involved a pair of gold earrings found in his Seattle storage locker that linked to the 12-year-old girl. Alcala tried to argue that he in fact wore those earrings on the dating game in 1978 to suggest that he wasn't the killer, but the jury wasn't really convinced. In February of 2010, Alcala was found to be guilty on all 5 murders and sentenced to death in March of 2010. In 2012, Alcala pleaded guilty to the 1971 and 1977 murders of 2 23-year-old women in New York. He was sentenced to 25 years to life, but he never served time for these crimes since he was already incarcerated in California. In 2016, Alcala was charged with the 1977 murder of another woman in Wyoming, but prosecutors decided to extradite him for trial. Authorities also suspected that Alcala had killed another woman in the San Francisco Bay Area in 1977, though the DNA evidence at the crime scene had degraded far too much to be able to test, so no charges ended up being brought forward. Several of Alcala's victims survived his attacks and testified against him. In 2010, authorities released many of his photographs to the general public in hopes of possibly identifying more of the unfortunate victims. While Alcala awaited execution, California's death penalty became the subject of a number of lawsuits, reforms, and ballot initiatives. In March of 2019, Governor Gavin Newsom issued a moratorium on the death penalty, meaning that Alcala would not be executed, though his sentence remained in place. Rodney Alcala died on July 24th of 2021 from unspecified natural causes while hospitalized in California's San Joaquin Valley. He was 77 years old. When the news of his death broke, one of his surviving victims said, "The planet is a better place without him, that's for sure." She added, "I've moved on with my life, so this doesn't really affect me. It's a long time coming, but he got his karma." Alcala's victims have been the subject of numerous documentaries and true crime shows, including the 2024 Netflix film Woman of the Hour, which I mentioned earlier, that covers his infamous appearance on the dating game back in 1978. In today's video, we're going to be actually watching footage of that very episode, seeing what nonverbal tells he gave off during that time, if there were any red flags that could be picked up on by the general public. Obviously, during that time, Bradshaw had picked up on some form of nonverbal red flags to be able to alert her to his weirdness and creepiness. So in today's video, we'll see if we can do the same. I think that's enough of the backstory. Let's go ahead and dive into this episode of the dating game from back in 1978. Apologies for any audio or video quality issues with this. It's from 1978. Let's go ahead and dive in.
Time our show and your host, Jim Lyons.
Hey! Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And welcome to the dating game. And we'll get right underway. It's time to meet our first 3 eligible bachelors for game number 1. And here they are.
I'm gonna go ahead and pause here. So just to make note of some very obvious things, but especially for those of you who are just listening and not actually watching, this is a very controlled environment. Everything has been pre-planned. On some level, we can expect some scripting. I do believe that the answers that are given by each contestant in regards to what the woman asks in this are not scripted, as they do not know the questions before the actual event. So we're going to be able to see some nonverbal communication that seems to be fairly genuine. However, that being said, this is not only televised, it's in front of a studio audience, and it's on stage. So a lot of what we're going to see nonverbally is going to be extremely filtered through people wanting to appear a specific way to the public. However, that being said, even with that in mind, it's very difficult for a person to maintain all of these avenues of concentration while trying to present a convincing lie or persona. The more time that you do it, the better you get at it. However, that being said, it is still difficult to actually maintain throughout the entirety of an extended clip. So we'll still be able to draw some things from this. With all of that in mind, let's go ahead and continue.
Good luck, gentlemen. Well, let's see. Bachelor number 1 is a successful photographer who got his start when his father found him in the dark room at the age of 13, fully developed. Between takes, he might find him skydiving or motorcycling. Please welcome Rodney Alcala. Rod, welcome. Next, we welcome to this very...
I'm gonna go ahead and pause here. So that's an interesting, I don't know, just a weird intro into Alcala himself. Is this like his father found him in the basement fully developed? I don't really get what the point of that. I think they were just trying to find a way to make that lighthearted. However, what I want to make note of non-verbally from Alcala immediately are his eyes. Many people notice his eyes pretty quickly because they seem rather dark. And the reason for that is because the whites of his eyes are not as clearly visible, which that, for us, evolutionarily speaking, triggers this animalistic response. If you even look at the evolution of domesticated dogs, as they became more domesticated, they evolved a muscle that allowed them to show the whites of their eyes because human beings are evolved to feel more closely related to other beings that show the whites of their eyes. It's not common in nature. So when we come over here to Rodney Alcala, you notice that not as much of the whites of his eyes are visible, giving his eyes this fairly dark look that many people found a little unsettling. It is something that I wanted to be able to make note of as we continue through this. You see that he has a pretty big smile and that he possibly forces it to reach his eyes a little bit. However, we can rely on fairly reasonably that this is all forced for the sake of television. So even that smile could be seen as faked. Regardless, let's continue watching this footage.
Very stage, a confirmed bachelor who believes in life, liberty, and the happiness of pursuit. He is an actor, a snorkel buff, and he's from New York, New York. Jed Mills. Jed, good luck to you. And bachelor number 3 first became interested in acting when at 7 he played Frosty the Snowman in a school play. Now, years later, his agent keeps telling him there are just no jobs around for a balding, middle-aged snowflake anymore. That's not true. He works a lot. He's into music and soccer. Here is Armand Chiami. Armand.
just want to make note real quick. One, a lot of the jokes and references that are going to be made here are going to be obviously dated. This is an old show, so bear with me on that. But then in regards to the third guy who is, a balding snowflake, you see his defensiveness come out largely in the prolonged eye blink that he has in response to how the presenter presented him to the audience. That defensiveness does make sense. It was a little bit of a slight that was used towards him in regards to that, whatever kind of thing. But we're kind of understanding a little bit about these three nonverbal as we continue here, but let's actually watch through the footage.
And those are three bachelors for the game, and we'll be right back to meet our young lady after this. Don't go away. And it's time to meet our young lady for game number one, and here she is. Here is a young lady with a wealth of experience. She once earned a living massaging feet, but she quit.
I'm gonna go ahead and pause there. So I was watching the three gentlemen during this time when speaking about the young lady. Now, something that is fascinating non-verbally speaking is that as a stimulus comes into the body, we have ways of soothing that stimulus down. And this can be through a number of different avenues of the stimulus side. It could be a positive one, it could be a negative one. There's all sorts of different styles of stimulus that we can experience as a human being. Something that's very interesting to make note of are gravity-defying gestures. It's literally the human body fighting against gravity to perform this gesture. One of those would be the fluttering of a foot while crossed. You could see that with people picking up their hands and just becoming more agitated. At rest, a body will want to remain at rest until an external stimulus inspires it to do something other than be at rest. So as soon as they mention this woman coming into the picture here, you could see the two furthest right contestants, the ones who aren't in fact serial murderers, start to display gravity-defying gestures. This is done through a bouncing of the leg. This is done through some reposturing. However, if you watch Rodney, he remains largely still. Now, while this doesn't have anything to do specifically with his guilt, it does have something to do with his psychology in that he's not presenting these gravity-defying gestures in regards to something that is positively stimulating for him. He's maintaining the same nonverbal posturing that he had beforehand. For those of you that do not know, we have something called mirror neurons. We see characters, individuals do various actions. Mirror neurons fire in our brains. However, they do not carry out to the extent of mirroring the actual action itself. This is only different when you see somebody yawning and smiling. When you see somebody yawn, there's almost the unavoidable urge to yawn yourself. This is due to your mirror neurons. And similarly, when you see somebody who has an infectious smile or laugh, it's very hard to not smile and or laugh with them as well. Again, thanks to the mirror neurons. At this point, it's so minimal that it wouldn't have been enough to be like, ooh, this guy's suspicious. But at very least, it is something to pay attention to. Regardless, let's continue watching.
She quit when her boss suggested that she work her way up. Then she taught school in Phoenix, Arizona, and now she's here to educate our three bachelors in the art of amour. Welcome, if you will, sensational Cheryl Bradshaw. Hello, Cheryl. Don't sit down yet. Just a minute. Want to make sure everything is straight. You relaxed? You feel okay? All right. You know there are three bachelors over there. They'll be 1, 2, and 3. Ask them anything you like to find out more about them, except their name, age, occupation, or income, okay? And we're going to start by having them say hello to you and see how they sound. Number 1, would you say hello to Cheryl, please?
We're going to have a great time together, Cheryl.
Okay. Number 2.
What I want to make note of is with his first interaction here, he doesn't reflect any happiness across his emotional state on his face until after he states his little weird thing that he does there. What characterizes his facial expression most during that time is the activity on one side of his nose, indicating a level of disgust. Along with that, we're seeing the drawing together and lowering of his eyebrows. Now, this could all be considered a part of a play act that he's putting forward before breaking into the genuine smile. However, we know from context clues that that's not necessarily actually the case. Something that is brought up regularly in nonverbal communication reading is the possibility of somebody being an actor or an actress, the ability to force and fake emotional states in a way that fools the vast majority of the population. And that's very potential. Everybody can train to become a good actor or actress. Some are better at it than others, but there is that possibility to do so. But what it all really boils down to is how emotions work psychologically. And there's two groups that really function through this. There's the people that believe that emotions happen and then we experience them. And there are the people that believe that we experience a thing that then causes the emotion. So the causation itself is the part in question here. And with that sort of framework in mind, seeing this sort of display from him still leaves us having questions depending on what group you believe the emotional side runs into. And there are a myriad of experiments that go to prove either side, not the least of which for the side that says that emotions control us, is that it has been shown technologically that we can determine what decision will be made by an individual before that individual knows that they're going to determine that. And this was made even popular on YouTube by the YouTube channel Vsauce, as he did in his Mind Field an experiment showing that a machine would know which button he would press before he pressed it, even without him himself knowing.
This task seems easy enough. Just push either button before the light comes on. So why is it so difficult? Wow. It's difficult because this machine is actually reading my mind. It knows when I decide to push a button and lights them up before I can actually push one.
How does it feel when it's happening?
It feels like right then. It already knew. I'm trying to not have my mind read. Here's how the box works. My decision to push a button doesn't begin when I think it does. It's actually preceded by subconscious activity I'm not aware of, but that the machine can detect. For the first few minutes, I push buttons and the box records my brain activity, learning which behaviors follow which subconscious processes. Eventually, the box can know what I'm about to do before even I do.
So there are some complexities to this. However, if we're assuming that emotions actually inspire us to do the physical actions, then we're left with some pretty substantial questions. Why did he have this disgust and possible contempt, or at very least aggression, seeping into his face while saying we're going to have a great time in regards to this person? We do have questions. Let's continue watching.
Hey, number 2.
Hi, Cheryl. It's nice to almost meet you.
And number 3.
Cheryl. Hello.
All right, so you saw the other two by comparison. The third one was obviously a little weird. To me, a lot of this game show is very weird. It feels very stilted. There are areas where especially the era's sexistness will come through. It's got some complexities, to be sure, but what I want to be able to point out is the differences in the nonverbal expressions from the two as opposed to Rodney. Throughout the other two, you see a consistent smile that's taking place there, albeit with some nuances around it as they're trying to present whatever catchphrase that they want to this person to potentially woo them. The only one who does not keep that consistent smile throughout is Rodney. So contextually speaking, it's still another little red flag. It's not enough to be able to point any form of contention towards him yet, but it is enough to be able to say, I need to pay attention. At very, very minimum, I need to pay attention to what this person's doing because he's been different than the other two. Fascinating things. Let's continue.
Oh, you got a lot to work with there, I'll tell you. Are you ready? Questions all set?
Oh, I'm all ready.
All right, please have a seat then. Cheryl, if you would, make yourself comfortable. When you're situated, you may begin. Good luck, gentlemen, and here we go.
Bachelor number 1.
Yes.
I'm gonna go ahead and pause here. So obviously, from Bradshaw's side of things, this is so overtly theatricized. Perhaps some of the cadences would fit more culturally for that time, but even then, this was a very overtly theatricized persona that she was putting on to be able to play up this show. So for us watching this now, anything that we glean from her will have to be seeped rather than overtly displayed because she's so prevalently presenting this persona to everyone. Let's keep watching.
Yes.
What's your best time?
The best time is at nighttime,
Why do you say that?
because that's the only time there is.
The only time? What's wrong with morning, afternoon?
Well, they're okay, but nighttime's when it really gets good. Then you're really ready.
How about you, bachelor number?
All right, gonna go ahead and pause that. That's an interesting response, in my opinion. Again, we're seeing this rather regular shifting into partial disgust, lowering of the eyebrows coming from Rodney. And that would make sense contextually for him as the serial killer that he was to feel this level of perhaps disgust and maybe even superiority to the people that he was talking to. But then verbally speaking, I find it fascinating that he harps rather regularly on this nighttime side of things, which even evolutionarily speaking, we as the humans that we are wary of darkness. We're wary of things that we cannot see because that's where danger can lurk. And so with him very adamantly insisting that the only good time was nighttime was rather eerie, especially in regards to the fact that many of his crimes were carried out later at night. People after the fact were able to look at this answer and see the creepiness really shine through because of his patterns that he had seen that Bradshaw was not privy to, unfortunately. Fortunately for Bradshaw, she had enough internal intuition to say, this person is not okay for me. And this was done through a number of nonverbal means that even she herself was not fully aware of why she felt he was off. She just did. Let's watch.
Bachelor number 2.
Right now.
Right now, anytime. Right here in front of everybody, huh?
Now's the best time.
Anytime, huh? Okay, bachelor number 2. There's one thing I've been wondering about all my life.
Just one, huh?
Just one. What's the difference between a soldier and a sailor?
Well, soldier never gets his feet wet.
He never gets his feet wet.
I thought that was very good. Number
Hey,
2.
I kind of liked it.
Again, it's cringy to me. I don't know. People back then apparently watched this as entertainment. For me, this would be something that I would put on for work. This is extremely uncomfortable to watch, but as we're watching contestant number 2 talk about these various things, you could see some of the uncertainties start to seep out in his nonverbal communication. You see some of the tenseness in his face with the lip compressions, and then even afterwards as he's saying, it sounds good to me, you see him shrugging a lot and shifting around in his chair, and these are all indicators of agitation and insecurity in what's being said. So obviously he's not feeling super confident about that. And I mean, in this, I have difficulty not being caught up on the cringe of that show, but I'm going to do my absolute best to try to go through this and not exclusively rag on how awful the concept is. Let's continue.
Rim shot. It takes a little time, you know.
Yeah, right.
Okay, bachelor number 3, sing me to sleep. And remember, I'm not your average baby.
Chantilly lace and a pretty face and a ponytail hanging down. Wiggle and a walk and a giggle and a talk. Love makes the world go round.
Beautiful bachelor number 3. Just beautiful. Great voice. I'm a drama. Drama teacher, and I'm going to audition each of you for my private class. Bachelor number 1. You're a dirty old man. Take it.
Oh, come on, over here.
Oh, honey, we ought to go out and boogie.
Really?
Bachelor number
From Rodney's side, obviously a lot of the nonverbal things that we saw in the prior answers stayed consistent, even again in this very horrifically awkward, cringy scene. He still is maintaining that narrowing and drawing together of the eyebrows, lowering of those with a little bit of activity in the corners of the nose to indicate that disgust. It's staying consistent. I don't know. Let me know. Is this the type of content that you would enjoy watching on television? Like, I'm having difficulty in my soul, but perhaps you're having a good time with that. Regardless, Rodney is still showing his characteristics non-verbally that do make sense, especially contextually with what we understand in this 2020 vision that we're fortunate enough to have. Let's continue watching.
Number 2, you're an innocent virgin maiden writing in her diary.
An innocent virgin maiden.
Yes.
Writing in your diary, dear diary.
For contestant number 2, the most primary nonverbal communication that's being displayed across his face during that time is mostly fear, which I think is funny. And fear, obviously, all of the 7 universal emotions, they blend together and mix with other emotional expressions and displays to be able to present fairly unique ones. But the primary one that I'm seeing are the drawing apart of the corners of the mouth, drawing kind of off to the side and down. In that expression, I like to call it the oops expression. It's partially fear mixed in there. And it's a weird question, guys. I don't know how I would respond to that. It's a strange thing to try to do during any form of public presentation in general, and especially during that day and age. He was just really not doing super well at that, and the very overt fear goes to promote that and show that very clearly. Regardless, though, we're not really focusing on 1 and 2. It's just nice to be able to have those contextual, natural, nonverbal cues from people who, in fact, haven't killed possibly 130 victims. It's nice to be able to have that context in regards to the person that we're focusing on. Whew-wee. Regardless, let's continue watching.
Dear diary.
Dear diary, I'm longing not to be an innocent virgin maiden any longer. When?
Yes. Bachelor number 3, you're yourself having a complete nervous breakdown after our first date.
Cheryl. Why? Please come back and kiss me goodnight.
Bachelor number 3.
All right, gonna go ahead and pause there. So that is more what you would realistically expect from somebody who hasn't been trained in acting. For everybody that's like, oh, all of these people are just really fantastic actors, things like that. It's not very common, especially in areas that you have a lot of pressure put onto you. The ability to pull off a persona that is convincing and natural and flows naturally in all avenues, both verbally and non-verbally, is very difficult to do unless you're trained. If you haven't been trained, you're going to come across something more like Bachelor number 3, who was not at all convincing on any level of the caricature that he was trying to present at that time. So when we come around to somebody like Rodney Alcala, since he also is not a trained on-screen talent, the pressures that he is experiencing now are likely to still seep through on some level. Now, depending on how he presents psychologically, there can be some hindrances and enablements to that. If he's psychopathic and he has the inability to feel and experience emotional states as the rest of the population, perhaps he can present some of these personas a little bit better, but even still, under the amount of pressure that they can be found in, it's very difficult for a person to maintain that in a convincing fashion or style. We're still gleaning more information even contextually from this, but all the while throughout all of this, I'm just slowly dying inside and withering away into a small husk of myself, just trying to get through the cringe of this concept. So let's watch.
Number 3, I'm going to make you a star someday. A Bachelor number 1, I am serving you for dinner.
Oh.
What are you called and what do you look like?
I'm called the banana, and I look really good.
Can you be a little more descriptive?
Peel me.
later, Bachelor One. Later.
So that's that big line that I mentioned at the beginning of this, is the whole banana peel me thing, which obviously you can even hear that the audience interaction to that and reaction to that was fairly positive, a lot more cheering. We're left wondering as the audience watching it now, decades later, was that not actually edited in there to sound more positive? It's not unheard of to be done on television in general, but again, I'm left just wallowing in the amount of cringe that this show is, that it inspires, that the responses and the contestants all embody during all of this. It's just, to me, really weird and not on any conceivable level promoting genuine connection between people, because everything that we're seeing here is so obviously and front and foremost fake. But that's neither here nor there. We're just getting more of an understanding about how Rodney would present himself. And in this specific answer, you see that he has a level of brazenness. He's willing to take chances and risks, as this is the most innuendoous response that he has had as of yet, especially in contrast to the other two contestants. In reality, it's not how real connection is made. So anyway, let's keep watching this.
How about you, Bachelor number 2? If I was serving you for dinner, what would you be like?
I would be like a tall glass of wine in a short glass.
While you're figuring that one out, it's time now, Cheryl, to make up your mind. So relax and think about it. And while Sharon will decide which one of the 3 bachelors she thinks is the best for her, which one gets the date, we'll take a little time out for these good words. Don't go away. Welcome back to
I do think I understand why all of my generation's parents were like, no, TV rots your brain. If this is what I grew up with, I would also believe that TV rotted your brain. I'm feeling it actively decaying my brain as I watch it now, decades later. I understand, and I would agree. I would also want to die and not want my kids to ever watch it. Anyway.
Welcome back to the dating game, and Cheryl, we have reached the moment of truth, as we call it. You've heard from the bachelors, you got some great dramatic presentations, some good answers, but now I'm going to ask you a question. Will that date be bachelor number 1, bachelor number 2, or bachelor number 3? Who gets the dates?
Well, I like bananas, so I'll take 1.
Number 1, bachelor number 1, all right. Well, I won't even ask any more questions about that. I'll just tell you something about the other bachelors. You didn't choose number 2, who did a fine acting job as a virgin maiden. He is an actor, a skin diver from New York City. Say hi to Jed Mills. Jed, come on and meet Cheryl. Aw, shucks. You didn't choose number 3 either, and he is into music and soccer. You can get over here, Jed, so the other guy can get in. Attaboy. And here he is, Armand Chiami. All right, Armand. Oh, wow. Well, gentlemen, you missed out on the date. We're sorry about that. We do have some gifts for you, though, and you played a great game. Really super. Thanks so much. Okay, come back and see us again. Thank you. There they go. However, you did leave 1 remaining, and this is your date, and I want to tell you something about him. Cheryl? He's a skydiver, so he's got a lot of nerve. He's into motorcycling. He's also a fine photographer. Say hello to Rodney Alcala. Rodney, come on and say hello. Congratulations, Rod. You did it with a 1 answer. Well, as far as I can see, Cheryl and Rodney, it looks like the 2 of you may be involved in some sort of racket. So we're going to have you taped to the court. Oh.
I'm gonna go ahead and pause here. We don't have too much left of this video clip, but what I'm noticing from Bradshaw during this time is that the smile that she is presenting as Rodney kind of comes out does not fully reach her eyes. And I'm curious at that point, is that the point that she started to notice, like, maybe this person isn't my style or my type? And then as things continue forward, that she discovered more and more about Rodney that she didn't like, or that he was acting off in some way. That being said, from Rodney's side of things, I'm not seeing anything too overt non-verbally to be able to point me away from him if I were in Bradshaw's position.
God forbid.
I don't, realistically, I wouldn't have chosen anybody because I wouldn't be in this position. But if I were, I would not have seen anything at that moment of him walking around the little barrier there to be able to alert me to how strange he really was. It's fascinating to make note of here. Let's go ahead and finish up the last little bit of this and we'll talk.
First, you'll receive tennis lessons from expert Naomi Besa of the famous Kirkwood Tennis Club. That starts. And you'll soon be acing everyone off the courts. And to make sure you both look as professional as you'll become, complete tennis outfits will be provided by Bill Darling's Tennis Shop. It'll really make you look like part of the racket set. Then it's off to Magic Mountain, one of America's greatest and most complete amusement parks, with plenty of excitement to challenge any daring dater, like the Revolution that'll help you turn the town upside down, and of course the world's greatest roller coaster, the Colossus. Magic Mountain, just a half an hour north of Hollywood, California. So have fun playing tennis. Thank you, Rodney. Thank you. Okay. You can go relax, meet each other, say hello, get acquainted, and they'll be back. And before we begin our next game, let's find out what runners-up will receive today from Johnny Jacobs. John?
Gonna stop it there because frankly, I don't care about the rest of the game show. It sucks. But with what I was seeing non-verbally between Rodney and Bradshaw at the end is Rodney would regularly use both hands to be able to make touches to Bradshaw. These touches are subliminal messages of attraction or draw to that person. If you flip around to Bradshaw's side of things, she has the polite hand behind his back, but this arm over here stays very stationary to her side. She makes no effort to do any other touch-ins, again indicating that level of attraction. Then at the very, very end, she even drops both hands as Rodney has his hand still behind her. She has both hands off to her side, turns and leaves without non-verbally checking in with the potential partner that she's next to, indicating to us that even at that level, something felt off to her as displayed non-verbally. Now, throughout that, what I do want to make note of Rodney in this is that he is charming. He's quick to smile. He's quick to make a joke. He also stands in such a way that's very pronounced. He has good posture. He keeps open body language. These are all things that subconsciously attract people to him. The person that I found most relatable to Rodney was Ted Bundy. They had a very similar style of smiling and laughing off various aspects of things, would make jokes and could woo people fairly easily because of these various tactics that they learned, while on the other side of things still being a monster. That also being said, even though they can present this facade of charm, to people that know what they were looking for and looking at, it does quickly show and highlight areas that aren't up to that par, that don't push that facade of charm. It really does highlight a lot of what we already know now in post, but could have known better then had nonverbal communication been something that was more popularized in general media. And that's something that I'm very grateful for in today's day and age. Fortunately, as time has gone on and more eyes are turned towards it and more attention can be turned towards it, people are becoming more and more aware of these various avenues of manipulation that can be done by people intentionally while being able to see some of the subconscious seepage that comes out afterwards or even during. We are evolved as creatures to be able to detect danger rather effectively. That's why we are where we are now. So with that, as you're sensing some of these sorts of things, it's good to try to hone those skills to where you're no longer left wondering like, why did I feel off about this person? But this mindset of being able to decode a person's movements to understand what it is they're feeling behind is still a fairly new revolution in popularized media. And I hope to be able to see it continue to grow and become more concrete in areas that we can't develop concrete answers as of yet. And as science continues to expand and we can look better and more concretely into a person's mind and how it functions and how it presents, some of these areas that are gray and nonverbal communication can become more concrete and arguably more black and white. Regardless, that's what we were able to see from the dating game back in old television and all of the uncomfortable interactions here. So let me know your thoughts in the comments of this video. Have you heard of this storyline at all? If you have, do you have anything else that could add positive contribution to the discussion of it? There's always things to be able to learn, even looking back retroactively at various patterns and nonverbal tells in areas that we know the answers to be able to find answers to future things. So anything that you have is always welcome, and I always encourage being able to have a form of discussion in between various people in my comments section, it feels like it's a positive, beneficial thing as long as we're all being civil and really genuinely looking for answers rather than just trying to be contentious or, whatever. But with that being said, that is all that I've got for the day. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome as you always are, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.